everybody, and welcome back to Learning with YagmanX. That isn't actually a segment, but I guess it could be because I'm doing a lot of tutorial videos lately, and today is no exception. I am going to show you how to make a music video using a game engine, Unreal Engine 4 specifically. So this video actually follows on from my previous tutorial, which was how to write and produce a song. That detailed the behind the scenes of a song called We Feel It Too, and today I'll be taking you behind the scenes of how I made the music video for that very song. So if you have any interest in music production, songwriting, then please go and check that video out. There will be a link in the description, or it'll be up here somewhere. I know you find it hard when you're a background, all you love, you smile less. So when I create a song that I feel is worthy for release, I often want to release it with a music video. Why do you need to do this, you ask? Well, simple answer is you don't need to make a music video. However, I really believe in delivering the best narrative experience that I can through my creations, and if I have the opportunity to share with you both an auditory and a visual experience, then I will do that because I believe that it enhances my overall vision. And creating a music video in a game engine makes doing so extremely accessible. Hence why I'd like to make this video today, to show you that it is entirely possible to create a music video of your own. Filming within a games engine. I choose to create videos within a game engine because it gives me more freedom and opportunity to experiment with different cameras, different lenses, different locations, different lighting, different times of day even. And this just simply isn't possible if I were to film physically. I don't have the money to buy physical cameras, lenses, lighting equipment, and I definitely do not have the time to take out of my day job to go and scope filming locations. But with a game engine, you can take what you see in your head and create it digitally without as many restrictions. You want to have a more textured scene? No worries, let's just set up an exponential fog and add some particle systems. You want a different type of lens? That's easy. It's just in a film back drop-down menu for you to choose from in the Cine Camera Actor. You want to change the color grading of the shot live? Well, you can do that with post-processing. Those words might have just gone right over your head, but stick with me here. What I'm trying to say is that everything that you would need to film in the real world is readily available for you within a game engine. I'm not trying to say it's better or worse to film that way. I'm just saying that it's an option, and I want to talk you through how today. So within this video, I will talk about creative direction, preparing art for a digital environment, developing the video within Unreal Engine 4, and the final touches that I did in Premiere Pro. Step 1 is creative direction, and the first thing that I always start with is music video narrative. A video can help build upon the narrative of a song, providing visuals that enhance the feelings and meanings behind it. When creating a music video, I always start by asking myself, how can this song benefit from a music video, and how can I best portray the song's narrative? During the production process of the song, I already had established this narrative and theme, so I already knew the location that the music video needed to be set in, which was a bedroom. The music video needed to fulfill the feeling of being in a bedroom during lockdown, which a lot of us were. We can relate to this. The song is really calming and has very chill vibes, so I knew I wanted to reflect that within the music video, and the first thing that came to mind for me was a kind of lo-fi art style, an isometric bedroom, and a warm pastel color palette. Know your limitations. We can't be good at everything, and that is perfectly okay. And once we realize this, we then know that the sky is not the limit, and we won't be overwhelmed with possibilities. Instead, you can focus on what's realistic for you allowing yourself to focus on the skills that you have instead of trying to reach unattainable goals that will only frustrate you. So my own limitations and workarounds for these limitations when I was figuring out my music video were: limitation 1, I could not model, and I still can't model. So my workaround was to work with concept artist Braden May, who can model, and also to use a couple of models from the Unreal Engine Marketplace. Limitation number 2, the concept artist had limited time to work on this project, and 3D modeling was not their primary strength. So the workaround for this was to work together to limit the amount and complexity of the 3D models so that the workload was manageable and attainable for the concept artist. Limitation number 3 is that I have no 3D animation ability whatsoever. So the workaround was that I would have to look for an alternative to bring movement to the scene using my other skills, which is more of a tech designer. More on that later. And limitation number 4 is that I do have a tendency to strive for perfection, even though there's no such thing. So the workaround for this was that I gave myself a soft deadline of 2 months to complete this project, just so that I had a date to hold myself accountable for. 2. When I knew my limitations and possible workarounds for them, I could then put together a plan for the music video itself. I decided to have the music video focus on a really simple bedroom, having the camera pan around it and showing elements of my real room so it had a personal touch to it. And then with a more solid plan in mind, I could then create a list of what I needed to bring that to fruition. What I needed was one low poly 3D bedroom and individual assets for that bedroom. Each of these assets would have one material per object, and these would be created by my lovely concept artist, Braden. I also made sure that the concept artist knew that the walls and the objects of the room needed to be their own separate models so that I could hide or show them to allow free movement of the camera without having to worry about it clipping through any of the environment. I needed low poly 3D assets from the Unreal Engine Marketplace to create a city view from the bedroom window. I needed to have some sprite animations created to add some movement into the video. And finally, include elements of my real bedroom as textures within the 3D one, such as pages from my journal or photos around my bedroom of me and my friends. Documentation! I know. Nobody wants to document when they get to this stage in the process. They just want to get the ball rolling. That's the fun part, right? But a solid piece of documentation is vital to make a cohesive creation and to stop you falling into the trap of feature creep. Because that can make you work on something forever and then suddenly it becomes something completely different. You don't want to fall into that hole. Not all the time. Sometimes it can be good, but not all the time. Anyway, this is beneficial for both the cohesivity of the project and also your own mental health. And if you're working with others, it also just really helps to clarify your vision to make sure that everybody's on the same wavelength. So my documentation detailed the music video narrative that I needed, the color palette that I would reference when creating my materials, the reference images for the 3D models that had inspired my vision, a detailed list of the 3D models and assets that I needed from my concept artist, links that would be useful for me during the development phase, tutorials, things like that, and a to-do list for the development process so that I could tick things off as I went along and I knew that I wasn't missing anything. Step 2, preparing art for a digital environment. So 3D modeling. This image is the wonderful 3D room that concept artist Braden May created for me in Blender. Thank you very much. It's very cute indeed. These assets had a very low poly count and also most of them had no texture map, which made the artist's job much faster. However, it did mean that I couldn't bake the lights as the texture information was completely wrong on most of the models and it made the shadows extremely odd. However, this is fine because I was going to be working with mainly dynamic lighting as the scene was extremely low poly and very performant to work with, and I wasn't making a game, I was making a cinematic, so it's fine. Just so you know, dynamic lighting is when all of the lights are running in real time, and baked lighting is when the lights are baked into textures. Hence why the latter is much more performant, and you should probably do that if you're making a game or a much bigger project within a game engine. I'll go more into depth on the lighting in the development part of this video. Once I put these models into my level in Unreal Engine, I could then just move the assets around the room where I wanted them to be, and I created a new material for each of the objects so that I could have it match the color palette that I had in my documentation, including the musician. So a very common trope of music videos is to include the musician or musicians in the video, either playing the song and the instruments or just being a part of the song's narrative. I knew that I also wanted to include myself into the music video, but I wasn't quite sure how for quite a long time. I don't have the technology or skills to 3D model myself or 3D animate, so I actually ended up recycling an idea that I came up with in a previous short film that I'd created in Unreal Engine, which is using sprite animation. My idea was to include really simple sprite animations into the 3D bedroom to make it appear as if ghostly versions of myself were lingering within the room, acting out mundane movements such as resting on my bed, drinking coffee, sitting at my desk, playing the guitar. This technique helped to strengthen the overall narrative, as it shows how I spent a lot of time within the room and also shows how the music video spans a large length of time. To create this effect, I set up the cameras in the 3D space where I wanted each animation to be, so that I had reference for the camera's angle and zoom, and then I recreated these as best as I could in real life. By taking videos of myself doing the same actions in a real life version of the mocked up digital scene, I could then use these as a reference to trace over in Photoshop. In Photoshop, I imported these videos as video layers and then scrubbed through the timeline to find moments of that video that I would like to trace over, and then created a new layer to trace onto. By repeating this process of tracing onto new layers at different points of the video, I eventually saw my animation come to life in the timeline. This process, called rotoscope animation, takes quite a lot of time and patience, but the outcome is worth it. And once I was happy with the animation, I then selected the layers I had traced onto and exported them as a sprite sheet using a Photoshop script developed by Jesse Freeman. I'll put the link in the description down below. Having these set up as a sprite sheet then would enable me to set them up as sprite animations within Unreal Engine 4. And if you'd like a video solely based on how I do this one effect, please give this video a thumbs up, because I can't go into it now, we gotta move on. Making it personal. A music video, or any creative piece, in my opinion, is pretty stale if you don't have some personality in it that others can reflect on or relate to. For this project, I was also heavily influenced by the game Life is Strange and its moments of calm in particular. These were moments in the game where the player could sit and reflect on the current state of the character within the game's story, while the camera panned around their current surroundings, highlighting items of interest which might inform the player more about the character or situation they'd found themselves in throughout this narrative. And I attempted to recreate this by adding aspects of my own bedroom into the scene. By inserting Polaroids and pictures of me and my friends and family, as well as real entries from my journal, I hope to inspire some intrigue from the viewer as they watched my video, and also to make the space feel alive and lived in. To do this, I took well-lit photos of the elements of my room in a top-down view, and then removed the background in Photoshop, making them PNGs. That could then be used as a texture on some 3D models, such as an open book, or inserted directly onto a plain 3D object, which is basically just a flat square in Unreal Engine, and that's how I created my Polaroids. Make use of the Unreal Engine Marketplace. Especially when you're working as a solo creator, there's so much that goes into making a digital video, from 3D modeling to texturing, setting up the cameras, setting up the lighting, and so much more. With this in mind, I would implore you to at least look through the Unreal Engine Marketplace to see if there's anything that would help make your workflow easier. You never know when something that you thought would take you a long time to do or to learn is already available for you on the marketplace. And this will save you time to focus on the parts of your creation which are within your expertise. For this project, I used stylized nature pack, modular building set, and interactive stylized low poly grass to create the outside environment of my scene. Because I knew the focus would be on the inside of the bedroom, I could kind of get away with mix mashing multiple different low poly models from different sets. I also used Good Sky to create a more stylized skyline, and also Chameleon post-process to handle the visuals and the grading of the scene. Post-processing basically handles everything from the color grading but also to effects. For this music video in particular, I used two post processes, one for the overall look of the scene and then also one where the collision bounds were just around the window, and this handled the rain effect that you can see at the beginning of the video. I could then turn this effect off through the sequencer so that when the camera panned back towards the window at the very end of the music video, there was no rain. Ooh. Step 3. Developing the music video in Unreal Engine 4. Yes, you have made it to the game dev part. Congratulations. This is where it starts to get quite techy. Unreal Engine offers a whole treasure chest of goodies for you to create your cinematics with. However, it can be quite a large learning curve for you to understand how to get the most from it. To get a more detailed insight into how to create a cinematic, please do check out my video on how to create cinematics in Unreal Engine 4. It'd be really useful for you to watch that one so you at least know the kind of base principles of how to create a cinematic within Unreal Engine 4, and I don't have to then regurgitate myself again here. However, with every cinematic created, I do learn something new, so I want to talk to you today about what I learned that was new when creating this music video. Here's a quick recap on some of the terminology that I'll be using. Actor. An actor is any object within Unreal Engine 4. Material is the texture of an actor, the way that it looks. Mesh is the 3D modeled object. Blueprint is a visually scripted actor that allows for bespoke gameplay functionality. Variables are properties within a blueprint that either hold a value or reference an actor within the world. And Sequencer is the cinematic editor used within Unreal Engine 4. It gives the ability to create cinematics with a multi-track editor and allows the user to use keyframes to determine the content for the scene, controlling things like transformations, which moves things around, media, audio, and so much more. So let's take you through the things that I learned that was new here and that I think brought this music video to life. The first thing was lighting. This music video was set in a very small space, so lighting was extremely important. To do this, I used a few features within Unreal Engine that I hadn't used previously to elevate the lighting within my scene and allow me more control over it. Number 1, real-time ray tracing. I got to turn that bad boy on. Now that I have a beastie PC, I could use real-time ray tracing without having to worry about whether my graphics card could handle it. If you're looking for an easy way to get realistic lighting with soft shadows, you'll probably want to turn this on within the render tab in your project settings. However, I would recommend maybe duplicating your project if you're not 100% certain that your PC graphics card can handle it, because it could just crash your entire project and that's not good for anyone. The Unreal Engine documentation states, ray tracing effects look more natural, producing soft shadowing for lights, accurate ambient occlusion, AO, interactive global illumination, reflections, and more. It look pretty. 2. Light IES textures. My scene had lots of small light sources such as fairy lights and a candle, so I used IES textures to give a more realistic lighting effects to display on objects nearby these, such as the walls or other objects. IES stands for Illuminating Engineering Society Profiles, which are for a lighting industry standard method of demonstrating the brightness and fall off of light as it exits a particular real-world light fixture. I used IES Light Profile Pack, which granted me an array of textures to choose from so I could mimic the light fall off of a real object. Because the light is just a texture being displayed on the objects around it, it's a much more performant way of showing realistic lighting. Number 3 is light functions. So the IES Light Profile Pack also came with some light functions for me to use. These are materials that can be applied to a light's intensity and can be used to simulate moving events such as blinds, laser grids, searchlights, things like that. I used this to create moving sections of light within my mostly static scene. For example, I gave the laptop a digital glow, and also on the wall next to my bedroom window, I added streaks of light moving from bottom to top as if a car's light beams were driving by. If you'd like to know how to manipulate these light functions, then listen to me now. If not, then skip to this timestamp, because I did want to manipulate the speed and timing of the light function. I didn't like how uniform the timing of the light streaks were by the bedroom window, and I wanted it to appear as if cars were driving by a bit more randomly. So what I did was I went into the light function material, duplicated it, and manipulated the material to have the texture pan based on an artificial time which would be fed into the material via a blueprint at runtime. In the blueprint's construction script, which is used to set up an actor on creation of the blueprint object within the editor, I made a dynamic instance of the light function so that I could store it as a variable to use at runtime. I then used this reference within the blueprint's event graph, which contains events and function calls. To create the artificial time value, I used a timeline, which would output an ever-changing speed float value. A float is a decimal formatted number. The float of speed was controlled by the timeline's curve, which would play on an auto loop. Speed was then multiplied by delta time from the onTick function. Delta time is the time difference between the previous frame that was drawn and the current frame, and onTick runs every single frame. The output of this multiplication would update the current value of artificial time for that frame. I then fed this artificial time value into the light function material so that it moved less uniformly. This blueprint held the spotlight, which would have the light function on it. Talking blueprints, I don't know if I'm explaining it well. Finally, I also learned how to manually control the fall off of my light sources, so I could control how much light emitted from which source. It really added to the realism of the scene because it was lit up by multiple weak light sources. By default, Unreal Engine's lights are set up within their details panel to use inverse squared falloff. By unticking this option, you can use unitless intensity units and then manipulate the light falloff exponent to control exactly where the light should fall off in distance around the light source. It's a nifty handy nifty. Unreal Engine documentation states, inverse squared falloff is physically based distance falloff, where the attenuation radius is only clamping the light's contribution supported by all three light unit types. When disabled, only unitless is available. Lights with inverse squared falloff disabled are useful when placing low intensity fill lights where you don't want a bright spot near the light. Perfect for me. So let's talk widgets and widget animations. Widgets are used to display 3D UI elements within your scene. And for this music video, I used widgets to display a YouTube page, which was output through a laptop object, and also a text message display, which was output through a phone object. To do this, you create a widget blueprint to set up the UI and any gameplay functionality for that UI, and then you can reference this within the output actors blueprint as a widget component. The YouTube page was relatively simple, with me incorporating different sections of a real web page such as the tab and sidebars, with a video of the acoustic version of the song being played. More info on how I got this video into the widget in the next step. The sidebar incorporated images from my Discord server and also names from my patrons who, without their support, I would not be able to create things like this. I then created a blueprint which stored the laptop static mesh as well as the widget component layered upon the screen. The phone, however, was a little bit more complicated, as I had to create a blueprint which would update the most recent text message with a string, which is just a series of characters, that I sent from the sequencer. When this happened, I also set up widget animations to create a pop-up effect to mimic that of a real text message. I also did the same for the 3 dots which represent that a person is typing. I created these animations using the widget blueprint's timeline by pressing the plus animation button down the bottom left and then keyframing which elements I wanted to change and where along the allocated animation timeframe. These animations then get stored as variables within the widget blueprint's graph so that I could set up the functions to trigger the correct animation at the right time. These got called via the sequencer using sequencer events. More on that later. Video image sequence. Listen up, because this totally changed my perspective on using in-engine video. So I wanted to have a video being played as a part of the laptop widget with the YouTube page, and I wanted it to show my acoustic version of the song We Feel It Too as a little Easter egg to those who have watched both versions. In the past, however, I have actually struggled rendering videos through Unreal Engine as a video material because the video playback frame rate does not stay consistent with the frame rate of the overall video render. This makes it impossible to know which video frame will show within the sequence render, and also displays it at a much slower speed than it should. So this time I decided to render a video image sequence instead, controlled by the sequencer, and this helped the problem immensely. Because it's a video image sequence, we don't have to worry about the frame rate because it's just a series of images that it's running through very quickly. This helps extremely with the timing. It's not performant though, and I can't imagine it would be great if you're making a video game, but for a cinematic, it works a treat. To do this, I created a JPEG sequence from my video via VLC Media Player, and I will leave a detailed explanation on how to do this in the description down below. These images will be stored within a new folder, and in Unreal Engine I then created an image media source which will store your video image sequence and made this folder of images the sequence path, overriding the frame rate of its output to be 24 frames per second to match my cinematic render. This image media source could then be used as a media track within the sequencer, so I could control when it was playing and what frames would play at which point. I set the track to output within the laptop widget, setting the image to be a video material that got reference from a media texture, which output whatever was set to play within a media player. It was here that I set the image media source to play. And yes, that was confusing. Setting up videos in Unreal is extremely convoluted. Just remember this. The image media source is what stores my video sequence of images. It just says, this is the folder of images, let's make a video out of it. The media player dictates what should be played. So, in my case, it was my image media source. The media player is referenced by the media texture. And then the media texture is referenced by the media material, so you can put this video onto objects in the 3D scene. The media material is then referenced by whatever object is playing within the scene. In our case, it was the laptop, so it was the widget. Oh, that makes sense. And now I had full control over which parts of the video would be played via the sequencer. So this was so much easier than my previous attempts at using video in Unreal Engine. Whew. Okay, are you still going? Okay, good on you. All right, sequencer events. Sequencer events allow you to put triggers within the sequencer to fire off scripted functionality within other blueprints. For example, this is how we would trigger off the animations in the widgets that I spoke about previously. They aren't needed if you're only wanting to change things that can already be done within the editor, such as moving objects or turning their visibility on or off. But it does really help when you want to have more bespoke events, such as animations or spawning actors, things like that. How to set these up has been covered extensively in my How to Create a Cinematic in Unreal Engine 4, so I won't repeat myself here. However, I will share with you something that I think is pretty important and I didn't mention in the previous video. To test in-game functionality that is triggered via the sequencer events, you'll have to test the sequencer while the game is running. And to do this, I go into the level blueprint and set up a reference to my sequencer to then play on begin play. However, the game will run when you render your final sequence, so you do not have to have this hooked up when you render. Trust me, this will save you a world of time and frustration due to crashes, as you'll be forcing it to render twice simultaneously. You don't want to do that. So when you test it, have it hooked up in the level blueprint to play the sequencer, but when you render it, unhook it. Don't have that running, please. And then rendering the final video. We're nearly there, you nearly made it, well done. Well done. Upon rendering, I did end up taking quite a few different takes, and this is perfectly normal, and I would actually say you might want to do this, especially if you have bespoke things such as particles or animations, as the outcome will be different each time, and it's nice to give yourself a few different takes to choose from and work with. To speed up the export, I left the audio output format at its default to no audio. This makes sense to me, as the audio would export as a separate file anyway, so you'd have to work in a different software to export them together. To export your sequencer, you can do test renders first by ticking Use Compression to speed up the process. Adjust the compression quality to your needs, with 1 being the most compressed and 100 being the best quality. You can also account for warm-up frames to start your particle effects before your rendering begins, so that your scene looks at its best. Step 4! The final step! Final touches in Premiere Pro! Using Premiere Pro or any other video editing software is a really nice way to wrap up the video and also include the audio. This allowed me to choose the best AVI files, which are the files that Unreal Editor spits out after rendering. And I could use these files to clean up any transitions and make sure that everything cut nicely to the beat of the song. When creating the Premiere Pro project, I had to ensure that it was set up to match the 24 frames per second, which the render from Unreal Engine was. You can do that either in the project settings or by right-clicking on an already imported video file and choosing Modify, Interpret Footage, and change Assume this frame rate to 24 frames per second. Then you export and boom! You have a little music video, baba. Well done, you did it. Now you can release. Wasn't that simple? Okay, maybe not simple, but hey, it's attainable. Game engines are free, did you know that? So there you have it, a music video created entirely from scratch and from home, all within a game engine. And a little bit of help from a video editing software. I know I've bombarded you with a lot of information, so I really commend you for sticking with me in this video. Ultimately, the more you use any software, and this also goes for game engines, the more you will understand the best way to use it and what works for you and the projects that you would like to create within it. And all I can do and all I do try to do is share with you my findings whenever I use it to create my projects. I hope this was somewhat insightful and educational. I just really wanted to be put out there that making a music video really is something that is attainable, that can be done within a games engine if you choose to, and I would like to help others do the same and realize the same. I also realize that there is a lot of information to try to condense down into one video like this one. If I raised any points that you would like to hear more of in detail, then please do let me know in the comments down below, and perhaps I'll look into doing shorter videos that go into more depth on certain aspects. Either way, I wish you the very best in all of your creative endeavors. And if you do decide to use Unreal Engine or any game engine, Unity as well is a great one to create videos, music videos, anything, then let me know. I'd really like to see what you do with it. As always, if you'd like to see more videos like this one, please do subscribe, click the thumbs up, do the bell and all that kind of stuff. I'd really appreciate it. And if you want to see more of this space, then I stream every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. GMT over on Twitch. Description down below for all of my socials and all that jazz. But yeah, I think that's probably enough of me rambling now. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Really appreciate it. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but oh, I feel like I've been sitting here for an eternity. I've also written an article format of this video, so if you want to read that and soak up more information, then you can check it out on my Medium, which is also down in the description down below. Really hope that I did an alright job of explaining some of these things, because I try and make these videos as accessible as possible, but you know, there's only so much you can do in one video, isn't there? But I also don't want to not give you enough information, so it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Have a lovely day or evening. Bye. I am so yellow. This top is like reflecting on my face. Open